We rented the house because it was cheap and close to my job, which is the kind of sentence that always turns into a warning later. My wife, Laura, said we could reset here, her word. After the medical bills from her mom's stroke ate through the last of our savings. I kept spreadsheets. I kept receipts. I kept my voice even when the numbers didn't add up. The basement smelled like damp cardboard and old paint. The landlord, Mr. Reddick, told us not to worry about it. Just don't store anything valuable down there. It sounded like small talk. I nodded like a reasonable man. 2 months in, the sump pump died. Water pooled in a low corner, and I went down with a flashlight, work gloves, and that tight feeling I get when something costs money. I pulled boxes off the floor, stacked them on cinder blocks, and noticed a section of shelving that didn't match the rest. Newer wood, newer screws. Behind it was a narrow gap and, wedged in dust and cobwebs, a cedar chest the size of a footlocker. The lid had a warped brass latch, dark with age. I didn't think treasure. I thought previous tenants' junk and liability. Part 2. Took me a minute to drag it out. The floor was gritty, and the chest scraped like it didn't want to move. When the latch finally popped, my mouth went dry in that immediate, physical way, like my body decided before my brain did. Inside were velvet pouches, yellowed paper, and jewelry, heavy, old, detailed. Not costume stuff. A brooch with tiny seed pearls. A necklace with a cameo that looked like someone's stern great-grandmother. Rings with worn engraving. Everything had that muted glow of gold that isn't shiny so much as stubborn. There was also a thin leather notebook with brittle pages. Dates from the 1800s. A name, E. Harlan, and entries about the deposit and the trust. The handwriting was neat, almost accountant-like. It felt wrong to be holding it in my basement in 2025, under a flickering bulb, in a rental we could barely afford. I closed the lid and just sat there on the bottom step, listening to the house settle. My first thought wasn't romance or history. It was the credit card balance and the way my 401k statement had started looking like an insult. I remember thinking very calmly, this could fix things. Then I remember thinking equally calmly, this could ruin us. I told Laura that night. I tried to sound casual, like I'd found an old Monopoly set. I carried the chest upstairs and set it on the dining table. She froze when she saw it, like her breath caught before mine did. Then she smiled, too fast, too bright, and said, "Oh my God." We laid everything out on a towel like we were running a pawn shop. Laura's fingers shook when she touched the necklace. Mine were steadier, which I took as proof I was the responsible one. I said the words out loud. "We have to tell the landlord." My voice was even almost proud of itself. Laura kept staring at the notebook. "Do you know what this could be worth?" she asked. She said it quietly, like it was a prayer. "I don't know," I said, "but it's not ours." She looked at me with something I didn't recognize at first. It wasn't greed, not exactly. It was exhaustion with teeth. "Do you know how much your not ours has cost us?" she asked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. She meant her mom's rehab, the second mortgage we didn't take because I refused, the vacations we didn't go on, the retirement age that kept sliding backward. I told myself she was just stressed. That's what I always told myself when the budget turned into a fight. For 2 days we didn't touch the chest. I went to work and stared at my monitor like I could force time to rewind. Laura stayed home, decluttering, which really meant pacing. On the third night, she asked if we could at least have it appraised, so we know what we're dealing with. That sounded rational enough to my control-focused brain. Information before action. We took 3 pieces, 1 ring, the cameo brooch, the pearl necklace, to a jeweler in town who did estate work. I watched him through the glass counter. He used a loupe, weighed the gold, tested a clasp. He kept glancing up at us with a look that made my stomach drop lower each time. "These are old," he said. "Mid-1800s, maybe earlier for the cameo. Qualities better than most people bring in." Laura asked, "Ballpark?" Her voice had that tight politeness people use at banks. He hesitated, then wrote a number on a scrap of paper and slid it toward me. 5 figures for just the 3 pieces, even without paperwork. My throat did that thing where swallowing feels loud. Then he asked, "Where did these come from?" I lied without thinking. "Family." The word came out smooth. That scared me more than the number. Back in the car, Laura stared out the window like she was trying not to cry. "That's just 3, she said. "There's, what, 30 pieces? And a notebook with names," I said. "That means someone might be looking for them." "No one's looking," she said, then corrected herself too quickly. "No one has looked in 100 years. That night she opened her laptop and started searching Harlan Trust Jewelry 1800s, like she was looking for a recipe. I sat beside her, pretending I wasn't watching her screen. She found an old newspaper scan about a fire in 1891, a family estate, missing valuables, and a reward that sounded enormous for the time. I didn't understand the weight of that until later. At the moment, my mind latched onto reward and translated it to modern dollars. It made my chest tight in a way that felt like hope and nausea. Laura said, "If it was missing, then no one legally owns it now." "That's not how it works," I said, but I wasn't sure. "I'm good with numbers, not law." She reached over and squeezed my hand. Her palm was damp. "We could pay off the hospital. We could stop bleeding," she said. "Just, let's not rush to hand it back to a landlord who's going to turn around and sell it." That was the first time she made it about fairness. I let that argument sit in my head because it made my doubt feel like morality instead of fear. We decided, this is where I'll admit my first real compromise, to keep quiet for a week. Just to research, I told myself. I moved the chest into the hall closet behind winter coats. Every time I walked past it, I felt a small electric prickle in my forearms. Mr. Reddick came by to look at the sump pump. He was in his late 60s, always in clean jeans, always too cheerful. He leaned over the basement stairs, wrinkled his nose, and said, "Old houses, right?" I watched him the whole time, waiting for him to glance at the gap behind the shelf. He didn't, or he pretended not to. After he left, Laura said, "See? He doesn't even know." But that night, when I went down to check the water level, the newer shelf board had a fresh scratch on it, like something had been pulled out and shoved back. I stood there with the flashlight beam trembling, trying to convince myself I hadn't noticed it before. Denial is quiet. It sounds like reason. I asked Laura if she'd been down there. She said no, and she looked me right in the eye when she said it. Her pupils were wide, like she'd been holding her breath. The first twist hit me on a Tuesday, disguised as mail. An envelope from a bank neither of us used, addressed to Laura, arrived in our box. It wasn't junk. It had that thick paper and formal font. I shouldn't have opened it. I did anyway because my hands were already shaking and I told myself I was protecting us. Inside was a notice about a safe deposit box fee overdue. 3 months. The branch was 2 towns over. The box was in Laura's name. When I confronted her, she didn't get angry. That almost would have been easier. She sat down slowly, like her legs stopped working, and said, "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" My voice stayed level, which I now see as my way of keeping control while the floor cracked. She rubbed her forehead. "I opened it years ago, after Dad died. There was an insurance payout. Not a lot. I kept it separate because you didn't trust me?" I asked. She flinched. "Because you'd have used it to patch holes. You always patch holes." I wanted something that didn't disappear into emergencies. Then she looked at the closet, at the hidden chest like it was calling her. "I didn't know the jewelry was in there, I swear. But when you found it, I thought maybe it was a sign." I drove to the bank the next day with her. I kept my face neutral like we were running errands. Inside, the air smelled like carpet cleaner and old money. Laura signed forms. The teller didn't smile. When the box opened, I expected papers, maybe a few coins. Instead, there was another pouch of jewelry, smaller, simpler pieces, and a folded letter dated 1998. From Laura's father. My chest tightened as I read his handwriting. He wrote about something from the old place, about keeping it safe, and about Reddick. He warned her not to trust Mr. Reddick with anything you don't want to lose. He said there was more hidden, but he didn't know where. only that it had been in the family a long time and never properly sorted. Laura's hands covered her mouth. "He never told me," she whispered, "but the letter was to her. He did tell her, just not out loud. And she'd kept it, and she'd kept the box, and she'd kept it all for me while I was measuring groceries against copays." I realized then that the chest in our closet wasn't a random discovery. It was a missing piece from a secret she already had. I didn't understand what that meant until later, when I started seeing our whole marriage as a series of locked boxes I'd mistaken for closets. I wanted to do the right thing. I still did. I told Laura we should call a lawyer, report the find, establish ownership properly. She nodded, tears in her eyes, and said, "Okay," in the voice people use when they mean no. 2 nights later, she suggested we just sell a few pieces quietly to cover the immediate bills. "Just enough to breathe," she said. "We'll do the legal thing after." I hated that logic because it fit. The hospital had started sending final notices. One card was about to jump to a penalty rate. My retirement contributions were already paused. I could feel the panic in my body, a constant low hum in my teeth. So I did what I never thought I'd do. I drove to a private buyer 2 counties away that the jeweler had a guy for, as long as I didn't mention where it came from. The guy's office smelled like cologne and dust. He weighed gold like it was flour. He didn't ask questions, which should have been a warning. He offered cash. Less than it was worth, but still enough to stop the bleeding for a month. When I took the envelope, my hand cramped around it like it might vanish. I told myself I was choosing my family over principle. That's how I justified it. On the drive home, every time I hit a bump, I expected sirens. For a week, it felt like a false resolution. Bills got paid. The phone stopped ringing. Laura's shoulders lowered for the first time in months. We even ate out, nothing fancy. But the check didn't make me nauseous. Then Mr. Reddick emailed saying he was doing routine basement maintenance and needed access. My stomach dropped so hard I had to grip the counter. The chest was upstairs, but the hiding spot was disturbed. The shelf, the scratch. We moved everything, cleaned the basement like we were erasing fingerprints. Laura kept saying, "He can't prove anything." I kept hearing my own lie at the jeweler family. Mr. Reddick arrived with a young guy and a toolbox. He was chatty, asking about our jobs, complimenting Laura's plants. It was too normal. Then he paused at the basement stairs and said, almost casually, "You folks find anything interesting down there?" The words were light, but my skin went cold. I laughed, an awful sound, and said, "Like what? Old spiders?" He smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. "Old houses have stories," he said, and walked down. After he left, Laura whispered, "He knows." Her voice was calm, which scared me more than panic. The second major twist wasn't about the jewelry itself. It was about the house. I started digging into property records online, partly because I needed to feel like I could control something again. What I found made my hands go numb. Mr. Reddick wasn't just a landlord. He'd bought the house from an estate sale connected to the Harlan family name in the late 90s. The date matched the letter in Laura's father's box. The sale had been messy, court filings about unaccounted assets. There was even an old local news article about antiques missing from the property after the transfer. The chest wasn't merely lost. It was contested, and Mr. Reddick had been in the middle of it. When I showed Laura, she stared at the screen, then at me. "My dad wrote not to trust him," she said. "He must have tried to take it, or Laura's dad might have taken it first." That thought slid into my mind like something oily. I didn't say it out loud, but it changed the shape of everything. We weren't accidental finders. We were inheritors of a theft. That night, Laura admitted she'd met Mr. Reddick once years ago with her father. She told me it was just a neighbor. She hadn't lied exactly. She'd just edited. Part 12. Mr. Reddick came back alone a few days later and said he needed to check the electrical panel. He stood in our kitchen, hands in his pockets, eyes drifting toward the closet without turning his head. "I've been doing this a long time," he said, voice friendly. "Sometimes tenants find things. Sometimes they do the right thing. I kept my tone neutral. We haven't found anything. He nodded slowly, like he was listening to a child insist the cookie jar wasn't empty. If you did, he said, it could get complicated. Taxes, ownership, police reports. Folks lose a lot trying to keep what isn't theirs. After he left, Laura sat on the floor with her back against the cabinet and started laughing quietly, then crying, then both at once. He's threatening us, she said. He's not even hiding it. That's when the third twist hit. The email from the bank about Laura's safe deposit box wasn't the only mail that had gone missing. I realized I hadn't seen our credit card statement in weeks. I logged in and found a new authorized user added to one account, Laura's name, but with a different middle initial. A small thing, a forgery-level thing. She swore she didn't do it. I believed her for about 10 seconds. Then I remembered how smoothly family had come out of my own mouth. People can do a lot while swearing. I don't feel proud of what I did next. I want to say I made a clean choice. I didn't. I called the jeweler's guy again and asked what he'd pay for the rest if I brought it all at once. He named a number that made my vision narrow. Enough to wipe out the medical debt, refill the emergency fund, even catch up on retirement contributions. It sounded like oxygen. Laura said, "We should do it before Reddick does something." Her voice was steady now, like she'd crossed a line and found it easier on the other side. So we boxed the jewelry, wrapped it in towels, and drove in silence. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Laura kept rubbing her thumb over her wedding ring, over and over. We sold it. Not all of it. Some pieces the buyer refused because they were too distinctive, but enough. Cash. A wire transfer to an account Laura insisted we open, just for this. I let her handle the forms because my stomach was in knots. I told myself I was delegating. On the way home, she said, "We're safe now." That was the false resolution, the moment I wanted to believe. For the first time in months, my shoulders dropped. I actually slept that night, and when I woke up, I realized something was missing. The notebook from the chest. The one with names and dates. Laura said she'd put it somewhere safe. She didn't say where. Part 14. The final collapse came in layers like rot under paint. First, the wire transfer vanished. Not literally, banks don't do magic, but it moved. I logged in to check our balance and saw the account was nearly empty. A series of outgoing transfers, all under 10,000, spaced out like someone who knew reporting thresholds. My hands went cold. My mouth tasted metallic. Laura didn't deny it. She didn't even look surprised that I'd noticed. She sat at the table and said, "I had to. To where?" My voice sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. "Trustee fees," she said, then corrected herself. "A lawyer. Someone who can protect us." I demanded details. She finally slid her phone across the table. There were texts with a number saved as A. Short messages, instructions, deadlines, an address, and the name at the bottom of a retainer agreement. Reddick and Associates. Not the landlord's first name, but the same last name. His son. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. Laura had taken our stolen money and paid the other side. She said, "They offered a deal. Immunity if we return what's left and pay penalties. If we don't, they'll report us and we'll be the ones in court, not them." Then the last twist. She showed me the notebook. She'd torn out pages. The pages with amounts. The pages that matched the transfers. She'd been planning for weeks, maybe longer. The chest hadn't changed her. It had revealed her. I moved into a motel off the highway for a while because I couldn't stand the quiet of the house. I kept going to work, kept answering emails, kept pretending my life wasn't dissolving into bank notices and legal letters. Mr. Reddick served us an eviction notice for renovations. But the timing wasn't subtle. Laura and I spoke through a lawyer after that. The jewelry we hadn't sold got returned. The buyer stopped answering my calls. The IRS sent a letter about unreported income, like a final insult. The hospital bills didn't disappear. They just got replaced by legal fees and tax penalties. Laura said she did what she did to save us. And I believe she believes that. I also believe she was saving herself. I can't untangle those two things anymore. People ask if we're divorcing. I say we're figuring it out. Because the truth is I can't afford the clean break. I'm ashamed of that. I'm also relieved, in a sick way, that the decision isn't entirely mine. Sometimes I catch myself doing the old habit. Checking statements, lining up numbers, looking for control. The closet in the rental house is empty now. The cedar smell is gone. But when I wake up at night, I still feel that first dry-mouthed moment in the basement. The latch popping, the weight of gold in my hands. What won't leave me alone isn't the jewelry. It's the notebook pages Laura tore out. Ragged edges, missing amounts, because I keep thinking about how easy paper rips, how cleanly secrets separate, and how I didn't hear anything tear while I was right there in the same house.